Have you heard about this videotape that kills you when you watch it?
What kind of tape?
A regular tape. People run it, I don't know. You start to play it, and it's like somebody's nightmare. And as soon as it's over, your phone rings. And what they say is, you will die in 7 days. And exactly 7 days later...
Who told you that?
Somebody from Rivera.
Who told you?
What's your problem?
I've watched it. We thought it was some kind of sick joke. And then the phone rang. It was a week ago.
You're just trying to scare me.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks? Why do I say this? Because we got Holy Ghost power.
You're listening to The Fear of God, a podcast exploring the intersection between Christianity and the horror genre.
Hello, and welcome back to the Fear of God podcast. I love this podcast. I've got a sinking feeling that maybe you do too, listener. Prattling on to you right now is one of your typical hosts / co-hosts, Nathan Rouse. Typically with me is just going on 20 years, chum, hetero life mate Reed Lackey. He's usually here. He walked past the screen just a minute ago with all of these like electrical cores and wires and widgets and doodads, and he's plugging things in. I could hear some water running. He's kept muttering something about the horses. I don't really, I don't know. Reed's an eccentric fellow. That seems a bit dangerous. If I'm perfectly frank, it does seem a bit dangerous. But Reed does like to live on the wild side a little bit. Many of you have not formally met him. You don't quite know just what Reed is capable of in his wilder moments. But while he's, I don't know, settling in for an electric bath, I don't know. That's, again, probably not safe. But while he's doing that, hopefully he'll be back in a second. I did want to encourage you, if you are new to the podcast or if you are just been with us for a while but are just lazy, please go to iTunes and subscribe to us. This is how we continue to grow in our, I don't know, the magic iTunes algorithm. Apple owns the world, whatever the mark of the beast that they are going to hand out that I will probably accept at a certain point in time. Regardless, please go subscribe to the podcast. Please leave a rating or a review, if for nothing else than to stroke our egos. But we also do appreciate those and they're really fun, and we enjoy getting to see what y'all think of the show. So please go do that. It would mean a lot to us. And Reed, buddy, you're kind of drenched, but you're a little sizzling. You okay? Are you okay?
I'm all right. It didn't. It didn't go according to plan.
No. I don't know what the plan was, but I wish you had talked to me about it before you.
Oh no, it was super simple. I was actually trying to, wash my toaster, and I figured it would be better and more prudent to wash and dry it at the same time. Just trying to save time, just trying to get more, just trying to keep things more efficient. Concise. Yeah. I tried the same thing with the hairdryer not that long ago, and it didn't go very well. I do, it's funny. I was fully expecting of all of the moments in our film that you could reference, I fully expected you to have me running off of a boat or a ferry and running into a propeller, maybe falling down a well, maybe watching a videotape.
What movie did we watch?
We watched Black Beauty.
Black Beauty. That's a good one. That is a scary movie, though.
This is
it's funny. Did you ever have you watched any of the show Portlandia? We've never talked about this.
I have seen the pilot, and that's it, actually.
Okay. Well, I've only seen about half a dozen, but I do really enjoy it, and I think if I were to dive in, I would be
probably like it
rewarded. There's this hysterical moment in an early episode where Carrie, I can't remember her last name, but there's this, it's sketch comedy. So there's this truncated narrative of her getting to know this suitor and them. Maybe do they get married? It's like a 5-minute sketch, but all of these beats of a relationship happen in a very short span of time. And towards the end, I think she's like blow drying her hair and he's in the tub and she like drops the blow dryer into the tub and he just gets electrocuted and dies. And that's the punchline of the bit. And I saw that, it was so hysterical to me because of the way I don't know. You have to go find it and watch it. Just look up, I don't know what. Something, but watch all of Portlandia to find that one bit. You will be
That is really okay. So that's really funny. Of all the things, it's like, oh yeah, no, it was this great thing, and then she just drops the hairdryer in and just electrocutes him and just kills him. It was really funny. I'm like,
accidental murder is the best.
Do we need to have a conversation? This is an intervention. I don't understand.
We do not. Hey, Reed. Guess what? Okay, so we are diving back into our Monster Mash series.
Yes,
but. We've been trucking along here. Last week, we moved into the next round, and I just got to know, Reed, are you ready for some Mortal Kombat?
Nathan. Hey.
Huh? What? Huh?
What? Nathan, that's not...
What?
We can't do it.
Are we whispering?
Yes. Remember? No, this is... Remember, because we're recording early, and so we can't. Because we're recording early, we can't. Remember, because you had that thing, and so we had to bank a couple of episodes earlier, and so we actually don't have the results of the survey, so we can't do anything with it.
Oh
my gosh!
So what are we gonna?
I'm sorry.
What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?
Let's do the rest of the episode like this.
Okay. It's very low. They're going to get really mad at us very quickly. But what do we do? Okay. So for technical reasons, we had to record early, and so we can't do the results. So what are the people going to do?
Okay, so all you have to do is go to so as this episode airs, which the reason that we don't have the Monster Mash results is because we had to record so soon after you haven't voted on the Monster Mash. So we don't know who the winners are yet. So, but if you go, as of this release, if you go, the survey should be, if it's not, it will be shortly, like later this evening or tomorrow. The survey will be available in the Facebook group, on the Facebook page, on Twitter. There'll be a notification on Instagram. Whatever you do, all the social media places, go, and you'll be voting in the semifinals for, I don't know if these would be considered semifinals or finals, but these will be the final pairings in each category. So the last two of the monsters, the last two of the humans, go and...
So this vote will get us from 4 to 2 in each category, or from 2 to 1?
No, they are voting on the last two. So you are voting right now for this week. You are voting for the champion, whoever the champion is of each category.
Wow.
So it is the final two, whoever that wound up being from the week when it was 4. So yeah, that survey is up, available. If it's not available as you listen to this, it should be available shortly after you listen to this.
I really want, and shout out W. David Lichty. Tell us how to pronounce your last name, but you're the man, by the way. I'm going to shout out David because David gives me audio visual tips when I message him. So you're getting mentioned on the air, brother. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
We talk about home theater setups.
Wow.
But
I'm being replaced.
He basically, no, you're never Reed. Never. You're being assimilated. No, but David wrote this amazing bit of what I will call fan fiction around our monsters category.
It was
that
brilliant.
He posted on the website, on the page, today, which will be 2 weeks ago when you're listening to this. But it's amazing. I really would love if more of you wanted to throw some of those up there, because they're amazing and glorious, and we will shout you out on the episode and maybe read an excerpt of your fanfic final battles. That's awesome. So, okay, fine. So I guess we will get back to the Monster Mash next week. We will put a pin in it right now, and we'll get back to it next week.
But in case you missed that, listeners, like, give us your fan fiction. I know Nathan just spent that, but I really want to emphasize that, because now I
wasn't being dismissive of that. I was encouraging it.
No, that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. I want to doubly reinforce. Like, hey, give us your fan fiction for these mashups. I'm going to say even present or past. Whatever mashups you want, like, give it to us, and we will read our favorites on the air. That will happen. Absolutely.
Yes, and one of them cannot be Nathan versus Reed.
Because that happens every single week. We have that on the air all the time.
No, we don't. Just in the squared circle,
You shut
brother.
up. Why you gotta keep bringing that up?
Okay, so I know it's just fun because I've been listening to Jaws since our feed got hung up, and it's like, that is such a fun section of our podcast 2 weeks ago. Okay, so fine, putting Monster Mash aside, but we are still back in the Monster Mash series. We have done Jaws, we have done Predator, we are now jumping down the well of what's his name?
Spirit.
Gore Verbinski's
Yes.
The Ring. Mm-hmm. Yes, in the spirits category. We are talking about The Ring today, so don't answer your phone anytime after this podcast airs or that you listen to it.
Yep.
But before we get there, I emoted a little bit a minute ago. I got kind of vocally loud, and it paid off to nothing. But I feel the compulsion to try it again and just be like, brother, what you watching? What you reading? This is like my 90s.
Okay.
My 90s, like, or like 2000s Third Eye Blind. What you listening to? You like that?
I do. I especially like the little coda.
Little semi-charm line.
Brought me back to Third Eye Blind and Blind Melon, and there were a lot of blind bands in the
Jumper.
Yeah.
They were the Blind Boys of Alabama.
I wouldn't consider them a 90s rock band.
Well, no, but I was just going with the blind thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Three Blind Mice.
See how they run. Reed, run us up to what you're watching, read, and listening to.
Okay, so I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the show before. If I have, then forgive me, but so it's been on for like 4 seasons now. And we started it when it first, I forget, because it feels like it's only been on for like a year or 2. I know it's in season 4, but I don't know how they break up their seasons. So my wife and I have been catching up with live episodes, catching up to the more recent episodes, I should say, of a show that is now on the Paramount Network. I think before it was on...
That's not a thing.
I forget it is a thing. So, but...
A Paramount Network?
Dude, yes. This is not the point of my story, but yes, Paramount Network is a thing. So, but so we've been catching up with, it airs on the Paramount Network. It is Lip Sync Battle. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it started on Jimmy Fallon. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it started on Jimmy Fallon, and I don't know how directly... I know it had to have been an inspiration by his work, but it is an actual half-hour competition show. Yeah. And so it's hosted by LL Cool J.
But... Now, is it celebrities all the time? Or
yes, it's all the time celebrities.
Okay, right.
It's all the time celebrities. Now, they're not always in the film and television world. They've occasionally had athletes. I was a big fan of Shaquille O'Neal's episode. That was really funny. He's a goofball. He's really funny.
That sounds right.
But, because it was great because Shaquille O'Neal did Love Shack. It was great. It was hysterical.
Funny.
So we've been catching up with episodes of Lip Sync Battle, and if you have not seen that show or watched that show, like, it's a lot of fun. Some episodes are hit or miss. Some of them are not as enjoyable, and occasionally you can tell when the artist when the celebrities didn't really have anything terribly clever to do, so instead they decided to just go for vulgarity or to kind of try to make fun of their partner, opponent, whatever it is. So some of the episodes are a little bit of a dud, but even the duds, you'll probably find something kind of fun to see in there. But the biggest reason I bring it up is, and you should YouTube this, I might share it to the Facebook page after this episode airs, because we're just trucking along. We've been watching a lot of them. There's a lot of really good ones, a lot of really strong episodes, some really funny lip syncing. The concept of the show, if you can't infer it by the title, is just these celebrities get up, they perform popular songs, but they do so by lip syncing the material instead of actually singing it. And the first
in a battle,
and then they have to compete against each other. There's 2 celebrities on it. Occasionally they'll have a special episode with like 4, like they did the cast of Stranger Things, and it was the 4 boys against each other, doing different songs, and that was fun. They each did 1, but most of the time they do 2, one of which is just them sort of doing their thing, and another which is like an elaborate production. So the episode that I'm going to point everybody to, and if you have not YouTubed this or seen this already, oh my gosh, YouTube it. I apologize that most of Lip Sync Battle is not as amazing and awesome as this, but this one is stunning. So Zendaya went up against Tom Holland. Have you seen this? Have you seen this thing?
I have seen the Tom Holland. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It's funny. I wondered if that's what when he's in like the tuxedo and then he takes the tuxedo off. What's the song? I can't remember.
Well, he starts with Singing in the Rain in the tuxedo and then goes to Rihanna's Umbrella. And it's stunning. It's amazing what he's able to do. It was so infectious, and he's like a trained dancer, so he's like really on point with all of the moves, and I mean, it was so fantastic. It was great. So,
well, he was Billy Elliot on Broadway, I believe. Or
he was
London.
He was. I don't know if he was. He was definitely in the show. I don't know if he was playing the character of Billy Elliot. He was definitely in the show. It might have been that he was Billy Elliot in the show on Broadway and then played a different character in the Billy Elliot movie. But I think he is in the movie as well. I would need to look all of that up. That's what.
It would surprise me if he's in the movie, but I don't know. You might be right. Just because the movie's pretty old and he's pretty young.
That does make sense. Yeah, so maybe it was just the show that he was in, but he's definitely a trained dancer and he's an excellent dancer.
That's a great movie.
Oh my gosh. So, so you should check out Lip Sync Battle. I'm having a lot of fun with it. LL Cool J and I think she's a supermodel, Christy Teigen. It's a fun show and I'm enjoying it. We're having a good time with it.
All right. Well, this is what audience members don't know is that you and I are in a heated lip sync battle right now where you are mouthing over my vocals and vice versa. But they just can't see us, so they don't know.
Yeah, it's really fun for us, though. We enjoy it. It's theater of the mind, everybody. Just sort of picture it.
It's impressive. It's impressive.
Have you ever seen that? Yes. Have you ever seen that game they do where it's something that, golly, Kristen Wiig and someone else, I forget who she does the bit with, where they're trying to
Fred
talk.
Armisen.
And Fred Armisen, and they try to talk over top of each other, and they try to say the same thing that the other person. Let's try it now.
They're just trying.
What's really fun?
No, don't run. It's so awkward.
It's so awkward. It's so awkward.
Oh my god. Speaking of Fred Armisen, have you ever seen Portlandia? All right,
that was fun for me.
So at least for one of us. So I did go see the Ant-Man and the Wasp recently.
I have not, so be careful with spoilers.
I know. I'm going to spoil it all. They both get stepped on in the first third of the movie, and that's it. It just kind of ends. And then it's just a movie of Michael Douglas just running around wondering where everybody went.
It turns into a soft sequel for the game.
Wow. Yeah. But he doesn't realize that they're both dead because they're tiny. You know, he just thinks it's the whole movie. He's just in an adventure that he thinks they're with him on. That'd be great.
And then stuff keeps happening to people purely accidentally, and he keeps crediting them with it. He just keeps like,
good job, Scott.
Thanks for that. I still don't know why you're giving me the silent treatment, but thanks for taking that back.
That's my daughter. Oh, that's great. But no, actually, I really enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp. I will not spoil it. We can talk about it again once you have seen it. I do think it might be a notch above Ant-Man in terms of kind of pound for pound enjoyability, and so that's awesome. It's got some pretty hysterical elements to it. The action set pieces I think were amazing. Just visually, how they pull off some of the scale is really impressive.
Nice.
Excuse me. So yes, I did go see Ant-Man and the Wasp. It is very much worth your trip to the Cineplex to keep up with the old MCU.
Cinema.
By the time this airs, most of our listeners who would see it probably have, but if you haven't yet, there are 2 after credit sequences. I like to know that going in so that I know how long to sit.
Absolutely. Yep.
I don't know if you do this. I've gotten to where I'll once the credits start, I will Google just to know okay, how many are there?
Every single time.
Really?
Every single time.
Because it's an MC movie, so you know there's going to be some, but I want to know how many there are because if I don't have to stay to the end, I really don't want to.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Although, wasn't that a great one? Is it on Spider-Man Homecoming where it's, they have those Captain America tutorials or the, PSAs. That's just so great.
And and at the end, he's all like, how many of these do we have to do?
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
Funny.
Your body is changing. I know. That's funny. Well, Reed, do you got anything else?
No. That's it.
Well, that's been another episode of What You Watching, Reading, Listening to, Read. I don't know why I'm on this 90s,
Well, we love the 90s.
I actually really loved that song. We do. We did a whole series dedicated to horror movies from the 90s.
Wow.
And that was fun.
Let me try one. I just think it's What you watching, reading, learning, listen to. What you watching, reading, and listening to.
Is it? Yeah.
That was Jimmy Eat World. It wasn't one of those blind bands, but
well, it's true because Jimmy ate them. Jimmy, you tied it back into Fear of God. Monster Mash, yes.
Oh my gosh, listeners who might have joined us for the very first time have no idea what's going on. I love it.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Do we read?
We don't. No, we don't.
I'm gonna be so thrilled, which is not my attempt to skew the voting.
You're making a soft attempt to skew the voting.
That's a Russia joke. Get it? Tavarish. Wow. Russia voting. But I would really love if Jimmy won the whole best Monster Mash.
We'll see
competition. Just because that would feel so appropriate.
I know, kind of it does.
And we could do Jimmy Eat World. It's just, and we could just make T-shirts of it, and it's just the naked dude from the movie.
Nobody would wear that. Nobody would wear that.
Somebody would wear it. Blake Collier would wear it. Blake loves and hates how much he's getting name dropped by me these days.
Yes, he does.
on that run, brother. You're the man.
Oh,
all right. So Reed, today we are jumping back into the Monster Mash series. Enough of the frivolity. Let's get serious. Okay.
Very serious.
Jumping back into Monster Mash. We talked about Jaws. We got laughed at by the Predator. Today we are getting contorted by Samara, talking about 2002's Gore Verbinski directed The Ring.
The Ring.
Ringu.
So can I start with a little story? So,
please. I like that. I like stories.
What listeners, if we went all the way back to episode 1, we kind of vaguely referenced this, but I don't think we've ever told the story. So in brief, some of the details aren't really important, but following our collegiate days, you and I moved out to California together. And I don't know if you remember the timeline, but this was released the same exact month, almost the same exact week that we moved from North Carolina for me, Georgia for you, out to California. And so when we moved out here, I think it was the very first week, we went to see this movie. It was getting a lot of hype.
Really?
We went to see this movie.
I always love because my memory is so bad. And I also love how you'll surprise me sometimes with these apocryphal stories that I was involved in that I'm like, cool. That sounds fun.
When did that happen? That's great. I wish I could remember that because I was there, but I don't know.
Go ahead. You and I went to a movie.
Yeah, we went to see it, and I'm going to say this because you have your thoughts on it, and you can share your experience or whatever.
Please.
But you did not you were not really taken with the film in real time to the degree that you obnoxiously kept trying to ring my phone. like in the movie. You kept trying to call me. You kept trying to call me in the movie. And then when that didn't work, because I didn't...
2018 me is so proud of 2002 me, and I don't remember that at all, but that is beautiful and brilliant.
And so then, like, when you would try to call me, and I would not answer because I'm a good theater goer. And I kept looking and like I kept saying like, Nathan, stop calling my phone, like stop that. And so then you would just take to leaning over. You would lean over at different times, and you would just whisper, 7 days, 7 days. That's all you would do. The whole movie, like. Couldn't even enjoy this movie because
I don't remember that at all.
You could not, and I remember thinking every time you would talk about how you didn't like it, I'm like, no wonder you barely watched it. You spent most of the time trying to punk me, like 7 days. 7 days.
Amazing, and you've been sitting on that story, for 2 years,
saving it for
knowing the day we're going to record the ring, you're going to break that out, and I love so much about this moment.
Oh my gosh, that was
that is amazing.
I kept looking at you, and I can still get a visual of your face as I looked at you, and you were like so proud. You were like 7 days, and I looked at you, this big wide grin. You're like, listeners can't see my face, but you were like, oh man, just slack jawed. So like, ain't that funny? I mean, it was great. It was great.
That is so hysterical because I don't remember that at all, but I just do. I mean. I don't remember how much of anything clearly, but how much The Ring, the movie, has come up in our time recording The Fear of God, but
only a couple of times.
Yeah, but I know generally I had a negative memory of my affection for it, but I did not know that I did that to you in the theater. On the one hand, I want to apologize. On the other hand, I'm like, no. Oh no,
amazing. It's a funny story. Funny.
That was worth doing that 16 years ago just to be able to have the payoff moment right now. Like, why would I apologize for that at all? Like, that's amazing.
But let's just pause and reflect for just a moment. Like, listeners don't know our whole like moving across the country stories and everything, but like who knew that like several years later we'd be sitting here talking about this, and it all goes back to that first week that we were just sitting here, sitting in the theater watching The Ring. Little did we know.
What's funny about that is I do remember not The Ring clearly, but going to see Star Trek Insurrection with your cousin, who both of them, or at least one of them, does listen to the do they listen to the podcast?
I don't know. But it was actually Nemesis, because I remember this story.
Yes. Okay. Not Insurrection.
It was Nemesis, and I remember this story, man. So, guys, Nathan loves movies, but he is often
the stories that happen to be being told right now in tandem make it sound like I hate them, but I really love them.
Because you kept like whispering or giggling or something. I can't remember what you were doing. And then all of a sudden my cousin looked right at you and said, Nathan, shut up. It was great.
And I probably made a big...
He was so mad at you.
Sitting grin back at him.
Oh, man. Yes, you did. He was so mad. Oh, my gosh. He was so mad.
What is interesting about that to me is how much I despise movie talkers, like now. And I guess maybe always, but maybe clearly not. Wow. Okay. Well,
I remember one of my favorites. You usually have a good...
Listeners, I am safe to go to the movies with. Like that I'm as stunned by those stories as you
usually
are.
have a good pun like ready, like in your pocket.
That's true.
I remember when we went to see the Robert Downey Jr. starring Robert Duvall starring the Judge, and like as soon as the Universal or whatever logo popped up, you just lean over and you're just like, here come the Judge. Here come the Judge. I looked over at you like, what the? Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't think I referenced then, and maybe I haven't told you this, like in keeping with the theme right now of wisecrackery in a theater, when we went to see Hereditary. Did I tell you the story?
Oh yes, you did.
Okay.
I wasn't there for it, but it's pretty funny.
No, it's amazing. It's in line with this, and then we can move on to The Ring. But Hereditary, a going theme in the movie is decapitation. It happens a time, and then all of a sudden it's happening multiple
like
times.
Everywhere. Yes.
Yeah. Just the tagline for the movie could have been "Heads will roll" or something, or "Not a good time to lose one's head" or something. Anyway, so towards the end of the movie, a character gets decapitated, and then their levitating body is floating up to a treehouse, and another character is following them. And it's 2 minutes from the end of the film. We're all a little bedraggled by the lopped off, craniums that have been just sort of rolling throughout this film. And just in the quiet of the theater, we're all kind of traumatized by what we've watched. This decapitated head is floating up towards the treehouse. And I just said in the quiet and still, I said, heading on up. And it was glorious because it just got the best response from the crowd. It was great. It was great. Okay. Well, wow. What a digression we just had.
Days. I know. So I'll use that to piggyback into just some prompting questions. So I have been curious in general. So coming out of that, and I think we even referenced this on our very first episode, but coming out of that, I kind of liked The Ring. I've always kind of liked The Ring.
Even under those circumstances.
Even under those circumstances, yes, because I was rooting for the poor underdog movie. But no, so I've always kind of liked The Ring, and I knew that you always were kind of not fond of it, and so I'll use that to sort of prompt. I kind of already know some of your thoughts, but so how did you feel about it this time around? Because I think this was only the second time for either of us seeing it. There was that experience in the theater. Thank you again, and then. It was, I watched it for recording this episode. So that was just the last time I saw it. This is only the second time.
Well, I will let you in real time. So I was worried because I was like, man, I'm going to have to be a bit on the defensive here. Not defensive like in a bad way, but like Reed is probably, you and I hadn't pre-briefed our conversation at all.
Sure.
Prior to the second viewing. I honestly did not remember, much less that glorious story, but that it was you and I who had seen it together. Apologies. Just clearly it's not you, it's me. So I went into this new viewing knowing that people just really dig The Ring. I did not at the time. I saw it first, clearly, as sometimes happens, where you and I will come at a movie from a different angle. I was trying to be generous, not in a bad way, but just in a okay, let me really open myself up to this. Let me be willing to kind of change my opinion here to the point that I was more sympathetic to it this time around. I went, as I described it to you, I went from negative to neutral. I don't know that I pushed over into positive, and we'll talk about some of the particulars of why that is. But yeah, so for this viewing, it does feel a little bit like a time capsule. I do like Naomi Watts a lot. I love Brian Cox, but we'll get into some particulars. But in terms of general feeling, I was more open to it, which resulted in, like I said, going from kind of a negative perspective on it to more of just a neutral.
Sure.
Sure. And what about you, Mr. Lackey?
So ironically, I actually went from a relatively positive position down to a neutral position. So it dinged down for me a bit in this viewing, and I can get into some particulars in a bit about precisely why, but I always had a rather fond memory of it. And I remember kind of liking the movie, but in this viewing particularly, I remember what was originally sort of passable and easily forgivable flaws now stood out to me as somewhat bigger dings in the overall narrative. There's a couple of things that I will, without qualifier, praise about this film, and I think I understand why it became as popular as it did. I think a lot of it has to do with its release timing, but I think I understand why it is such a big hit. But I think for me this time around, it wasn't as impressive to me this go round. A couple of moments I still really like, and a couple of things I still am really drawn into and impressed by. But overall, I didn't like it as much.
Well, we've engaged in some pretty serious conversation up till now. I'm just kidding.
I know. Yeah, I figured.
But let's go into, kind of our likes dislikes kind of zone here, unless you have bits to trivialize. But I did want to say as a real summary statement, like I said, was more generous to it. But I think for me, what the movie gets right in terms of mood and atmosphere where it stumbles hard is and hear me, I haven't seen Ringu. I haven't seen the Japanese movie that inspired it, but where it fumbles hard is it tries to wrap its arms around so many different genre conventions. And I feel like it cannot hold them. Like it's just, it makes a valiant effort to try to wrangle a cohesive narrative out of it, but I don't think it achieves it personally.
Yeah.
You can almost go down the horror checklist and find something in this movie.
Sure.
And I will say that, so that was my summary statement. I want you to have a summary statement too. But one thing that I really did find myself giving a lot of latitude and runway for was I really appreciated that this movie feels like the sequel to a worse movie. Like most horror movies that deal with stupid things like haunted videotapes, what the content of the movie is the discovery of the tape and the effects it has on the initial viewers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like I actually like the conceit of Naomi Watts' character of Rachel, as her son calls her, being an investigative journalist trying to piece together what happened. Like, to me, that's a pretty cool launch pad for a plot.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it absolutely does. And I think I understand what you mean, that it's like, one of the major likes for me, there are 3 major moments in the film that I find very effective and I find really impressive. One of them is the entire opening sequence. I really genuinely like, and that's part of why I got really excited when I was rewatching the movie, is because I really like that opening sequence with Amber Tamblyn and she and her friend. They're talking about this videotape, and even though the premise itself even strikes me a bit absurd with that, but they're still talking about it. And she's like, "Oh, I've seen that tape." And then as things progress, the dread that builds culminates. Right. I'm like, that's a really effective opener. And so as I was watching it again this time, I was like, "Dang, yeah, like I really like this." And sadly, when it begins to get into the core narrative of the film, and maybe now's the time to unpack this, like part of my biggest dislike with it is I feel like the primary substance, the primary punch of the film hinges almost exclusively on its opening 10 minutes and its last 20 minutes. And I feel like that while the entire, let me mention Sixth Sense. Sixth Sense, I have heard criticisms against it that say, once you know the ending of Sixth Sense, watching the movie becomes pointless because it feels like that movie is all about the ending. Now, I disagree.
That's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I disagree with that. I feel like there's a lot going on in The Sixth Sense that is valuable regardless of the ending. But for me, this time around, The Ring did, like the main plot of her uncovering the mystery behind the video did sort of get muddled. I kept feeling like, okay, when is she going to get to the reveal? When is she going to get to the whole thing? Because I'm ready for it to just be uncovered. What's really going on with this, the videotape and everything. We should pause our likes, dislikes briefly for those who have been hiding under a rock for however long.
Or in a well.
And you know nothing about The Ring. You absolutely know nothing about The Ring. The premise, and be prepared to giggle a little bit or roll your eyes, because the premise, when just said outright, is a little absurd. There is a videotape circulating that when you watch it, it is a sequence of disparate images, very freakish, nightmarish sort of images that are inexplicably linked together. They don't really have a cohesive thing that they're trying to present. But when you watch this 6 or 7 minute video, however long it is, then the moment it stops, your phone rings, and when you pick it up, a cryptic, ghostly voice says 7 days, and then...
What does it say?
7 days. And so, and then 7 days from when you watch this video, you will die. That's the premise of the film. There's a victim of this phenomenon in the first 10 minutes of the film, and then that victim's, I believe it's her sister or aunt, okay, played by Naomi Watts. Her name is Rachel. She begins to sort of dig around a bit to try to uncover the root of what killed her niece. And so when she's trying to uncover all of that, I'm getting really thrown off by the relationship, because I actually thought that the girl that died was the boy's aunt, meaning that it would be Naomi Watts' sister.
They're cousins.
They're cousins? Oh, okay. So anyway, so regardless of that, So Naomi Watts' character keeps trying to uncover the root of like, hey, what caused this death? In the process, she watches the tape herself. Her ex-boyfriend also watches it, and that spirals them into this, okay, what was this video? How was it created? And that's the mystery that the film basically unfurls. We'll get to what the reveal is probably in a little bit, but...
Well, let's...
You want to go ahead and say?
Well, I don't know if you're going somewhere specific with this.
Well, no, that's okay. Let me roll with it. So, so basically, my ding on the film is that in repeat viewing, for me, the section of the film, which makes up, a good hour of the movie, is them trying to uncover these different mysteries. And the first time around, I kind of found that pretty interesting. And I was like, what does this all mean? And this twist and that surprise. And, Brian Cox, and now he's crazy. And now he takes his life in the bathtub and all these crazy things. So what's really going on here? And then it comes to find out, this is why I wanted to hold the, this will make sense to you in a second. I wanted to hold the big reveal because it's part of my scares list. If you want to go ahead and say it, then that's fine. But the big reveal is on my scares list. So that's why I was like, oh, let's hold it back a little bit. But if you want to go ahead and jump into it, we can.
I mean, is it your only scare?
No, it's one of 3.
Okay. Well, whatever, Reed. It's your show.
Wow.
I'm just
you listen. You ruined my experience of watching this movie, so I get to dictate how we do. I'm just kidding.
No, that's fine. Well, and we don't. Yeah. You can hold that until scares. All I wanted to interject was that I think a problem that I do have with this movie is kind of like, I've made this reference before, I believe, maybe on the show, where it's got the 24 problem, like the TV show 24, where if you watch 24, which has its merits, definitely, but the harder they worked to make that show stretch, the worse it got. But a given season of 24, let's say you're halfway through it, to try to explain how you got to that halfway point is like impossible. It's ridiculous. It's stupid to even go through the exercise of talking out, okay, well, it started with this and started that. This led to that. This led to that. This led to that. Like the labyrinth of dumb character choices that resulted in a given season of 24 wasn't worth taking away from the action and excitement that it could bring.
Sure.
Similar here with The Ring. Goodness gracious. Like what Reed just described is the most bare bones surface level version of the plot, because to actually try to explain the plot and understand the plot is nonsensical. It does not make sense. And we can get into some of the whys more, but I think that is a big ding I have against the movie, is the more you scratch, because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, like even by the end of the movie, you're like, I still don't really know. I understand
what it was about.
One particular mystery that got solved, but that was a very specific one buried under many others that sort of don't really make sense. Anyway, so
do you know what I thought this time around?
What?
I thought this time around, and this is a big, I apologize if listeners are really excited and they love this movie and they're like, oh, what do the Fear of God boys have to say about it? And then we're like trashing on it. But I had the thought while I was watching the movie, I was like, did Ed Wood direct this videotape? Because I'm sitting here and all I could think of was that scene.
I'll do better next time.
Well, no, all I could think of was that scene from Ed Wood where he's watching all this random stock footage and he's like, no, this is great. There's atomic bombs and there's chaos everywhere. We don't know what's going on, but it's scaring the buffalo. And I'm like, I'm sitting here watching that Ring video and I was like, oh yeah, there's all this stuff going on and we don't know, but it's scaring the horses. And I mean, like,
you have totally neutered that movie now. That is great. Well, I love it. No, I'm expressing gratitude. Like that is a wonderful take on that.
So yeah,
that disturbing, collection of stock footage. Yes. So hard pivot back to likes, dislikes. So yes, it's funny. That starts with the very first conversation. The amount of buy-in that has to happen for the coincidental nature of that opening sequence.
Oh, sure.
Like it is a high bar to clear to be like, oh, okay. Well, I guess that's where we're going and that's where we're at and that's where you're taking me. So I'm going to go. Sure. I'm going to get in the car and go with you. The car is already in motion. I'm gonna jump in. Anyway, so that's a big leap. There's this great Chris Rock bit where he's talking about, he's talking about deadbeat dads and kids getting incarcerated. This is a stand-up special from probably
sounds hilarious.
And I know it really is. And he says, his bit is when your kid calls his grandma mama and his mama Pam, he's going to jail. And I just thought, like, this kid is going to jail. Like, this little boy, Aiden, is going to go to jail because he calls his mama Rachel. He's like, she is not mama. She is like Rachel. She is like.
Still have no idea why he does that. I mean, I know they've got a tight relationship, or they've got like a tense relationship.
I think it's meant to be suggestive. She's a workaholic and he's having to grow up on his own, and he's a bad actor, and what are you going to do?
I really man, I'll get to my likes in a second. I really dislike that kid. I mean, no offense. I'm sure he's a great guy. I hope he has a great career, but I really dislike that kid. I dislike his performance. I dislike how they use him. He has which is ironic because he's tied to my major and biggest like, and I'll mention it in scares, but for the most part, I just really do not care for that kid's presence in the film, which also hurts when we get to it, which also hurts the final resolution of the film, because I'm not really that I understand why Rachel makes the choice she does, but I'm not bought in because I'm like, who cares? And that's me being like real dismissive too.
Oh, you mean that part where the movie made up rules as it went along? And
oh yeah, it did that, like left, right, up, down. It definitely did that.
Yeah.
And you know,
well, all right, let me give some credit here, because one thing I will praise, and because, yes, like you said, there are people who like this movie.
People who love it. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you and I talked about this off pod, like, the atmosphere is great. It's very...
I won't disagree with that, yeah.
I was taken with kind of the general cinematography. It is artfully crafted.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a competent film, if not a competent story to me.
Oh, absolutely. There's some great film craft at play. As much as I tease about Ed Wood having directed the little haunted videotape, like the film very effectively creates a consistent and unnerving mood. And I feel like that, you know, for viewers who respond very positively to that kind of thing, there's a lot to like about The Ring. There really is, because it does have about the only thing that I would say is cohesive about it is its tone and its mood. It's very uniform in that way. Feels very focused.
Well, I do love little subtle touches. Like, I presume you caught this because you're a smart movie-going individual. But
I am smart.
You is kind. The subtle changes to the video as it gets watched multiple times throughout the movie. Like, I don't know if you remember what Naomi Watts sees the first time she watches it is different in its ending than what Aiden sees in the middle of the movie.
That's funny. I did register that, but I always just thought that they were not showing us all of it.
I don't think so.
Really?
Personally.
Really?
I think
that's interesting.
Well, because I'm trying to resist going where you're trying to keep your scares from going, which is the big. Okay, so all right, so I have a couple more likes, dislikes. I mean, most people have seen this movie.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and so it's number 1 on my scares list. It's my favorite moment in the film. All of the resulting investigation that they do when they're doing the different work to try to uncover the videotape's description. Come to find out, at the heart of the creation of this video is a victim, a girl named Samara, who was presumably tortured by a series of experimental tests, not tortured, you know, in the traditional sense, but just she underwent a number of scientific tests. And while she was, you know, in those throes, she has like a kind of a psychic ability. And basically she is murdered by being thrown down a well where she has to stay for 7 days.
So her assailant thinks, but yes.
Yes. Yeah. And so basically what happens is, so then come to find out, she has imprinted her sort of psychic phenomena on this videotape. Well, Naomi Watts' character Rachel reads that as a cry for help. She helps sort of uncover Samara's body. They give her a burial. They do all this other stuff and they help her. The big reveal of the film is that she's talking to her son in what is presumably the denouement of the film, like the falling action. And then when she's like, when he's like, is the girl still in the dark place? And Rachel says, no, we helped her. You know, she's free. We helped her. And he leaps up in bed, wide-eyed, and he's like, you helped her? You weren't supposed to help her. You were not supposed to help her. And then his nose starts bleeding, and it all gets like freaky again and everything, which culminates in the ex-boyfriend Noah who at this point in the film, you think everybody's completely safe. You think the story has resolved. They've brought justice to this poor mistreated girl, and then come to find out, no, that mistreated girl was a nasty, vicious, vengeful, evil psychic spirit who just wants to burn the world down, and then she leaps out of the TV and kills Noah and all this crazy, nasty, awful garbage. So yeah, that's the big twist on the film, and I do think that moment is really, really effective. I think you have some different feelings about that, but that moment really invests me in the story more so than almost anything else in the film.
Like, as in, when you say that moment, are you referring to are you responding to the technical aspect of what happens in her emerging from the screen? Or are you responding to the fact that, what we thought was them freeing her kind of in a benevolent sense is them unleashing her? What do you mean?
I don't think I could have one without the other. Like, I think if it was just the reveal, that wouldn't hit as hard as it's the reveal immediately cut to the scene where Samara emerges from the TV and kills Noah. So I think either of those scenes in isolation wouldn't pack the punch that they both do in sequence. So it's like I can't really divorce one for the other, because I do admit, like, some of the technology looks a bit dated, so the effects look slightly dated, but it's still really effective to me. That big reveal of, like, you were not supposed to help her, and then, she never sleeps, and so you find out that the little girl is actually the monster of the movie, and then that monster claims yet another victim. That whole thing is very effective to me.
Yes. I think in isolation, yes, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's hard to sync it up with my misgivings about some of the narrative, kind of throw everything in the pot feelings. I mean, I'm not dismissing it. I think I can respect that as a scary moment. I think, some of the visual aspect of it has diminished over the 16 years since its release. Well, to double back real quick, because you were talking about thinking maybe we just didn't see all of which maybe is the case. But to my memory, which, though admittedly hazy, I did just watch this yesterday, so it's pretty fresh, and I did notice this, so who knows, maybe it's correct. When Naomi Watts watches it, the short film ends in static on the reveal of the well. Then, when Aiden watches it, whether it's because she intercepts him in time or what, the last image is the beginning of Samara crawling out of the well. You see, like, a hand come over and
interesting.
Start to emerge.
Okay.
That's all I'm registering is that's kind of cool to me, this sort of subtle little stuff over the movie. That
the video itself might possibly be alive or has an organic malleability to it, thanks to Samara.
Yeah. But let's all right, come on, let's camp out on that for a second. Like, I think it is hard to get past, which is maybe, help me discern this, which is maybe unfair to the movie. It is difficult to hurdle the sort of ridiculous factor associated with a demonic entity imprinting itself on a VHS tape and it getting passed around, let me couch it this way. It is not ridiculous because horror movies are made of far less than this. It's not ridiculous that there's this haunted artifact that affects people when they come in contact with it. That's as long as horror has been a genre is present. I think it's the mythology around it that is so convoluted and so are we meant to understand that these images in this short film are just psychic impressions edited together that are, I don't know.
Right.
I'm not totally interested in being talked into that being awesome. More just, it's hard to get past it, if that makes sense.
Well, and we joked off pod that it's like, one of the big dings about the film is not the film's fault, and that's that at the center of it is basically now an obsolete technology. So it's like, we talked about, it's like, the really creepy movie from 15 years ago about the 8-track tape that was haunted. Right, it's like, at this point, we're so far distanced. Most of the people who would see this film remember VHS, possibly, loosely remember it, but you're only about 10 to 15 years away from this being as obsolete a device for a haunted object as like an 8-track tape or a cassette tape or something like that. And again, that's not the film's fault. The film was dealing with the medium that it had at the time. DVD was around, but it wasn't as wildly popular, especially not in the Japanese original. The Japanese original was 98, and if my memory serves me correctly, the DVD as a format was not invented until either 96 or 97. So I'm not positive exactly about that, but it was very recent. So Ringu, the film, is dealing with, a VHS tape.
It's funny you say that, because the hallmarks of the time that I recall is how big it was that Sixth Sense and The Matrix were on DVD. Like that. Those were two giant entries to making that a mass market consumable. Absolutely.
And that's another reason why. So let's we're kind of getting all over the place, but I think a lot of this is really good. There's just there is quite a bit. For as much as we would ding down our overall feelings about the film, I think there's a lot to talk about. I do think one of the reasons why, and it was a major hit, I think if I'm remembering the little trivial information I saw, its budget was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $25 million, which, I don't have $25 million, but its budget was somewhere around there, and it made like triple digit of millions of dollars, like $260 million. I forget exactly how much it made, but it was very popular. And I was speculating about this because I think when you remember the time, this was 2002. It's coming off of the 90s, and the 90s, for all of the things that we did a whole series, #ILoveThe90s, where, we spent a lot of time talking about 90s films. One thing that I would in general say about 90s films is they don't typically have a great sense of mood or tone. They're much more sort of narrative plot based, in terms of like they're looking for big set pieces, they're looking for big action moments, they're looking for perhaps strong characterizations. There's not a lot in the horror genre that is really intending in the 90s to evoke mood. So then when The Ring comes out like fresh on the heels, like 2002, and as we've already said, one thing that it nails a bullseye on, in my opinion, is this very unnerving, unsettling mood, which it did take, I think, by being a direct remake of the Japanese films, because it started this whole wave of Japanese remakes. Like on following the success of The Ring, then it felt like every major horror hit from Asian cinema was now going to be remade. You had One Missed Call, you had Shudder, Pulse, you had The Grudge, you had Dark Water. There was like at least half a dozen to 10 in quick succession remakes of Japanese horror films. But I think people at the time were just sort of hungry for something that was really creepy and very unnerving and just had this unsettled tone to it. And it fizzled pretty quickly as far as trends in cinema go. But I think that's one thing in looking back at the film, sort of assessing it with a 2018 brain. The fact that it is imprinted on a VHS, the fact that sensibility does feel a bit dated now. And I think when I say that sensibility feels dated, I mentioned to you that I have seen worse films trying to do what The Ring is trying to do. As much as we would sort of express ambivalence towards it, there are films that are attempting what The Ring is attempting and barely succeed. They do almost none of it. But The Ring does a pretty good job of everything that it's, sort of scratching at or attempting to do. So I think that's a big reason why it was such a major hit, and that's why it took off so with audiences. But yeah, I do think that one of my major dings against it would be like, oh, it's a VHS tape. Well, I'm not scared of those, because now I literally this afternoon came across the Rocky III soundtrack on cassette tape, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw this out because I literally have no means to play it. I have nothing to do with it. So it's kind of a shame, these kind of obsolescent artifacts. But that's one way to escape Samara's curse. It's like, oh yeah, I imprinted myself on a videotape, and now I will get nobody, because nobody can watch this thing.
That reminds me of a number of years ago, Lost Season 5, I believe it was, released this really special, cool DVD sort of gift set for its release that was this Dharma binder with all these like fun little kitschy Dharma Initiative stuff attached to it.
Sure.
But one of the specific items was a VHS tape with like a Dharma orientation video on it. And I was like, sweet.
Wow.
I don't know where I can watch this.
I have to go to the library and rent a VCR. Oh my gosh.
And then I'll watch it and I'll be like, we're going to have to watch that again. You like that, Riri?
I did like that. I like that.
That's a Lost reference.
It is.
So let's jump into the scares real quick. Though we've alluded to a number of them. I think that no discussion of the scares in this movie is complete without discussing the horse scene.
Oh my Lord.
Late in the movie, Naomi Watts is on a ferry, and this imagery of dead or dying or incapacitated horses has prevailed throughout the film. Well, she encounters a gosh, what do you even call those things? You know, whatever type of trailer that people pull that has horses in it.
A horse trailer.
Sure, a horse trailer with a horse in it. So, although actually I thought this was dumb too. She's like making a really, because story, right? Because plot. She's making a really concerted effort to pet this horse to the point that you're like, okay, just back away from the horse and be done with the horse. But she presses in and keeps wanting to make herself known to this horse and petting it. And then, of course, it kicks the trailer wide open. It's this real dramatic cinematography sequence where the horse runs and leaps over her and over the railing of the ferry and plummets to the icy water below. And then the passengers run to the other side of the ferry, and you look down where the water's being kicked up by the wake of the boat, and then blood just fills the water below as this poor horse gets, propelled to death. Oh my gosh. I actually wrote, PETA is not happy with this movie.
No.
And, I mean, impressively, that whole sequence looks pretty legit. I mean, I hope it's not, but
no, absolutely.
It very much they sell it well.
Oh, absolutely, it does. Yeah, and that's the thing is like my 3 moments have now all been revealed. It's the opening 10-minute sequence, the big reveal of, you weren't supposed to help her, leading into Noah's death scene, and then that horse on the ferry. It's a genuinely very it's very disturbing. That's not nightmarish probably in and of itself unless you're a big animal lover, but it's very disturbing. No doubt about it.
I did wrote, what is it with horror movies and coughing crap up?
Oh my gosh, the hair sequence! Oh dear Lord!
Well, it's not hair. Remember, I thought it was hair first. It's not hair. Remember, it's it's like a node, like a node thing they put on her at the hospital.
Yes,
psychiatric
that's
hospital. Right. Although funny enough, was it this? After I watched The Ring, I watched the trailer. I think this is what it was. I watched the trailer for Rings, which
I haven't seen.
Last year's 7% Rotten Tomatoes. Future sequel.
Sure. Yeah.
And in the trailer, there's a girl coughing up a hairball. I was like, come on.
Oh, wow.
Man, we just keep jumping in.
I didn't even give Rings a chance, but Rings frustrated me because there was a new Friday the 13th sequel in the making, and Rings did so poorly that they scrapped the Friday the 13th sequel. And I'm like, guys, yeah. And I was like, guys, Friday the 13th has so much bigger of a fan following than Rings. Like, you reversed those orders wrong. Like, Friday the 13th would have done much better than Rings did. My opinion.
I mean, it might have at least gotten an 8% Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, I don't know how good the movie would have been, but it would have made.
I know. I'm just saying, but
yeah.
8% isn't a high bar to stretch for. All right. So, I mean, I actually was pretty disturbed by the imagery of the victims post Samara's encounter. It's pretty nasty.
That is a pretty freaky shot, and it's brief in the film.
Right.
It's very,
yes.
It's just sort of
but that's part of its effect.
Yeah, absolutely. They are very, and it's this image of like they kind of look waterlogged, like they've been soaking. Well, and it's appropriate considering she's down in this well, as if they've been soaking in water for like days and days and days. So that's the effect she has on her victims. That is genuinely very freaky. This would not be scares; it would be likes, dislikes. But I don't want to get far away without mentioning it. Naomi Watts is legitimately fantastic in this movie. Like she's wonderful. As much as I would ding. Well, and I like Brian Cox and his performance quite a bit as well. But as much as I would ding the rest of the general performances, she's fantastic and she anchors the movie really well, I think. She's just a really outstanding actor.
I did actually appreciate about that and this is why I say it feels like the sequel to a movie that we didn't need to watch anyway. Like, she is, I didn't look at her IMDb to know this, but she's a little bit older than what you would expect for kind of the flashy horror movie. I don't know if that makes any sense. I just like that it's a bit more established, a bit more mature.
She's not a teen, right?
Character,
right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I did appreciate that. That said, speaking of Naomi Watts, she is cold. After she discovers Noah's waterlogged body and she hides in the corner while the assistant goes up to discover it, I was like, dang, girl, you ain't right.
No, man, that's crazy. And I mean, and it's like you kind of understand why she's doing that, but it's just, it is. It's really, there's a little bit, we'll get into this a little bit in theme when I unpack my theme a little bit for this. Is just, there's a little bit of this whole like, wow, she's awful. Like, in terms of like as a human being, I don't like her performance is just fantastic, but just as a human being, I'm like, she's a little awful. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Well, lest we wait much longer, because I do think maybe what a dislike would be related to theme. You care if we
let's dive in? Down? Yeah, let's dive in. Yeah,
there's so much metaphor.
Let's say it's true. You know? It's true. Yes.
Throw me over, Reed. Throw me over.
Before we get too closed in by time.
You jump, I jump. I'm just mixing all the movies. So, and this is a little unfair to the movie because it's not totally interested in this, except the movie's kind of about this. I think it's unfortunate that for a movie that's about, on its face, the knowledge, being gifted, if you will, or cursed, with the knowledge of your death and the time you have, that the movie is deeply uninterested in exploring that.
Yes. I understand what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Which, hear me, again, she's a reporter. It would make sense that she would work to pursue the leads to where they took her. But the movie just does not do much at all. And in fact, by the time it gets to it, when she's in the cabin with Noah again and she's like, take care of Aiden, it's almost like, well, if she were to die, she's got like 2 hours left. You really did wait until the last, the 11th hour to start really noticing that.
Well, not to mention the fact that if she does, she's telling him take care of Aiden. He's got like a day. Right. Yeah, no, it's exactly. Yeah.
Figure it out. So I do want to camp out on that, but another one I've got too is just what I wrote down is the effect what we watch has on us. This movie is very meta in that way.
Yes.
I don't know that I really want to spend much time with that one. In fact, because the other one is more interesting to me. But this is where this movie is hard because I think it introduces an idea, it gives lip service to an idea that it doesn't care about.
Yeah, doesn't mature.
But I just think there's something really, because maybe then you're not really dealing in the horror genre anymore, but I think it would be an interesting take for a movie like this to actually have its characters spend time on what it means to be faced with your own death.
Sure, I understand. Well, and there's an even more, there's an even more insidious sort of element to this. I'm resistant to bring it up right now because I don't know how different the conversation will play out if we don't camp out on this idea for a little while of coming to terms with your own mortality.
Right.
I have something that I do think is related, but it feels like if I introduce it right now, I might steer completely away from the rest of.
Steer, Reed. We're at the bottom of the well together.
Let's see. We're going to be here for 7 days. Like, buckle up, listeners.
Right. 7 days.
7 days. Man, that was really dumb. So, so here's what this particular viewing. Here's what stood out to me. I have always huge dislike for me is the actual resolution of the story. First of all, it makes zero logical sense. There's no sense whatsoever to me that it's like, oh man, how did I don't even know. Do you remember those moments in movies where a mystery movie or some sort of M. Night Shyamalan does this all the time, where suddenly you see sequences from earlier in the film, everything pulls together and it's this is what you were missing. This big reveal is what you're missing. And in The Ring, she's like, why? What did I do differently? What was different about me? And then it shows you all of these different moments. She was never supposed to have a child, and all this. It shows you all of these different things. Yeah. And the conclusion is, I made a copy. And I remember sitting here thinking, like, what did any of what you just remembered have to do with the fact that you copied this videotape?
Yeah.
What did any of it have to do with anything? And that resolution has always struck me as so ridiculous that like, wait, that's how you escape this? At least with Jimmy the It Follows monster, the copy only, or like passing it along, only delays the inevitable. It doesn't actually stop the inevitable. It just delays it until, the It Follows monster is done with whoever's next in line. It's like, I can get behind that. You're just putting people in front. You're just buffering the queue, as it were. But this is like, no.
Well, and because It Follows makes a pretty direct point of articulating that to you.
Sure.
This movie, like you're saying, it reveals there's a copy, but you're left to be like, but what does that mean?
What does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything? And so
I'm cool with it meaning something, but I don't know what it's supposed to mean.
And here's what really, so this film does not take the opportunity to explore people who are given a finite amount of time. I keep resisting mentioning it because it's a completely different genre, but Calvary. Calvary is a film about a man who is basically told he has 7 more days to live, and the film is about how do you navigate that? How do you navigate that knowledge? Do you try to stop it? Do you try to run from it? Do you do anything differently? But that's a drama. That's not a horror.
What if Calvary is like a sub-tweet version of The Ring? Like right before the events that movie begin, Brendan Gleeson has just watched the video and gotten a phone call, and like, that's terrible. No wonder. I mean, it's the Ring expanded universe.
Don't sully my affection for Calvary with the connection to this film. Oh, that movie is so wonderful. So see Calvary, everybody. It's beautiful. Okay, so but so basically, it doesn't take the opportunity to do that because they're too busy trying to solve the mystery that ultimately is benign and not really that worthy of solving. But it did strike me this time around. The final line of the film, she realizes how, don't ask me, but she realizes we make a copy, it'll leave you alone. You'll be fine now because we make a copy, we'll show it to somebody else. So we'll make a copy of it. And then Aiden asks, well, what happens to the person that sees it? And then Naomi Watts looks up at the video screen of the copy that they're making, and then that's the end of it.
Right.
That's the ending of the cut to credits. And it struck me this time around, and maybe this is I'm going to try my best to connect it back to this idea that we're not reflecting on our own inevitable ends. Is she's making this copy, and I remember sitting here thinking, I'm like, dang, it doesn't matter what you've done or been involved with or what you suffer, as long as somebody else pays the consequences for it. Like, you're going to go ahead and pass the consequence along. Like, that's basically what you can do. Like, this is the ghostly, spectral equivalent of, I'm going to frame somebody else and make them suffer the heat for it. Meanwhile, I'm going to get away scot-free. And it really, like I mentioned earlier very glibly and briefly, how Naomi Watts' character is a terrible person. And really, this viewing of the film, I understand ideologically how a mother will do anything to save her son. I understand that. I have no feelings that the film needs to justify that choice to me. But I don't really like Aiden. Like, I don't really like him as like I don't really like that little kid. And then not only that, but I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, wow, and I mean, admittedly, the characters in It Follows do the exact same thing. But
yes, but you can chalk it up. There's up to teenage dumbness, this is immaturity, poor developmental maturity.
Sure. And but it did sort of strike this note in me of like, wow, she's basically stumbled on the way that she can get away from this curse scot-free, and she's going to pass this curse along to someone. She's essentially committing this sort of back alley murder where she's like, I'm just going to make this video, we're going to show it to somebody, and then that'll be the end of it. I don't know what's going to happen. And dovetailing that back into your thought about how the film is not really very interested in, or it doesn't seem to be interested in, a person recognizing the finite amount of time that they have left and coming to terms with their own inevitable ends. In fact, it is I think in total, a film about a person who is trying to cheat the inevitable consequences of their choices, trying to cheat getting out of what will come as a result of, what the effect that what we've allowed in has done to us. I'm speaking in very broad general terms, but I do think there's some value in just recognizing for a second, like, hey, you can take responsibility for what you've done, or you can simply scapegoat someone else to, you can pledge somebody, to go back to our episode on the graphic novel Witches. Like, you can essentially pledge somebody and be like, well, now it will be their consequence to deal with. And that really stood out to me this time around about this whole, like, passing blame, passing consequence, deftly sort of tricking the system in a way so that somebody else is going to suffer the consequences for it. And I think it all just boils down to not coming to terms with your own inevitable end. That and you're raising this notion to me of, like, she makes him complicit in her premeditation. Yes, absolutely.
And I think in to tie a ring around back to Jaws of what we teach our kids, and how like that moment is so telling for her as a human, much less as a parent. Because it's one thing you think about these sort of genre stories and the person who's with their child and they kill someone who's assaulting them, but it's an accident. It's not premeditated.
Right.
Now we kind of have to wrestle through the stories about wrestling through the consequences of that. Well, in The Ring, it's like, consequences be damned. Me and you, kid, we're just going to take out whoever we need to in order to stay alive now. And I think that's why, to me, a much more interesting version of this movie, like, can have almost all of the same component parts, but maybe truncate the mystery, the sleuthing over the course of 4 days. And maybe she hits a brick wall. No, I don't mean that literally. I just mean, like, maybe she hits a brick wall in the story and all of a sudden comes to her senses as a human and a mother and a parent and decides, oh my gosh, I've got 3 days left. I'm going to go spend them with my child. And maybe we as the viewer forget the threat. And then it comes back to get her in the end. You know what I mean? Like, that's
something
a more,
like that. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a more interesting kind of, like, when you prop up this, and that's, I think, ultimately why I would slight this movie so hard, is like, you are using this sort of narrative thing purely as a set dressing, as a device, and not really doing anything of value with it. But anyway, I don't really mean to beat up on the movie that much more, but other than to say, I do think it's interesting. We can drift away from the content of the movie for a moment and just kind of dwell in this sort of notion of time and the time we have and what we do with that and Gandalf. But, I do feel like there have been moments lately for me, and I don't know about how you would articulate this, but, like, they aren't like tectonic, earth-shattering kind of notions, but, I am 38, and though in the grand scheme of things that's not old, it is as old as I've ever been and will ever be, or well, not will ever be, but have ever been. And so, 40 is staring at me, and you just think about all these things. And two kind of para movie threads I want to tie in here. Britt Marling, who wrote and directed and starred in several films, Another Earth.
I really like her.
What is the name movie?
Sound of Your Voice.
Sound of Your Voice. That's what I'm looking for.
The East, the OA. I like all of those.
I'm not familiar with The East.
It's on Netflix. You should watch it. It's not as good as Sound of Your Voice, but...
Is it a film?
Yeah, it's a film. Now, I don't know if I think her production company was kind of, I don't know if it's one of those that she, like, was instrumental in the writing of it and everything. But,
right.
But it's got that similar tone.
She's amazing. She's
wonderful.
Incredibly impressive as a creative individual. I adore Another Earth.
You should see the OA too movie. If you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I started it. I'd probably have to dive back into it. We got about 2 into it. Regardless, I remember reading a profile of her, and it was honestly, I think it was in correlation to the Weinstein story breaking. And, she was just reflecting on having pondered her personal career. And I don't know if you know this. She left like a high profile, I think maybe law career.
Really?
Some high profile career like that to dive into the creative world.
That's funny. No, I didn't know that.
And in talking about the murmurs she had heard about Weinstein and how to pursue her career, something that she said, and I'm not camping out on that angle of the story, but something she said has stayed with me. And she said, I just got to where I knew how I wanted to trade my time.
Wow.
And where I wanted to do that. Like, and that sort of concept, that sort of phrasing, which is so, I mean, there's any number of ways people phrase that. That's kind of a cliche, but the way it was delivered, you know, what am I going to trade the time that I have? Like if life is a sort of transaction, my time is the currency that I possess. And so I really, that has really haunted me. Another thread that I want to tie in here, and then we can kind of camp out where we want or put the fire out and call it a night, whatever. I was listening to this NPR interview about 6 months ago that really jarred me and arrested me. And I have not read her book, but it was an interview with an author. I'm pulling her name up now. The author's name is Kate Bowler. Like you go bowling, Bowler. She's a professor at Duke Divinity School. She wrote a book called Everything Happens for a Reason, subtitled And Other Lies I've Loved. And to illustrate this is in the category of death and grief, is this book.
Oh, okay.
So Kate Bowler, this Duke Divinity School professor, was doing extended studies into the world of the prosperity gospel, and that's sort of ancillary to the story, except that was kind of her life's work, was really studying this sort of movement. She does come from a faith background.
Sure.
Well, she got stricken with, I believe, stage 4 cancer, and she's married, she has children, and was basically given a death sentence. And so she began wrestling with, okay, I've studied the prosperity gospel, which its core tenets are basically do enough of the right versions of faith, you will be taken care of. And it's just really fascinating to hear her talk. Again, I've not read the book, but what we do, it's fascinating, man. And why this movie misses the mark for me philosophically. What we do when we know. Because here's the problem. We do know.
Right. Yes.
We just don't know.
Right.
We are, or let's put it this way. We are certain. We just don't know. That's a decent way of putting it. And it's just fascinating to me as I approach 40 years old, which wildly is half a life, regardless of the quality of it at the particular ends of those poles. But, and you hear Britt Marling talk about how I trade my time, what I spend my only currency I really have on.
Right.
You hear this woman, Kate Bowler, talk about everything happens for a reason and other lies I've loved. What do I do when I'm told? You know enough of my personal story to know, like, while I have not suffered any sort of physical death or thank God, catastrophic physical debilitation, on an emotional sense, at a certain level, on a logistical sense, on a spiritual sense, there's a season of time where multiple, if we can use the word, deaths happened. And that sort of run of life will really train you, even though occasionally I find myself forgetting, which is scary, will train you to not hold it all too tightly, which doesn't mean things like your family, your loved ones, your children, that sort of thing. That's not what I mean. It's all the other stuff, because though we are certain we don't know. And once we do know of a spiritual death or an emotional death, not the least of which being a physical one on the horizon at some point, we have to be in a position to deal with that.
Right.
And to, which hear me, it was through the deep wells of support of a very small support system that I was able to come out of that particular season of my own life. So I'm not even patting myself on the back, but that support system and the things I learned in my pursuit and of watching those and of listening and of meditating and seeking wisdom and counsel in that season, you just kind of come to this place of, like, you don't hold it too tightly. You pursue gratitude. You express gratitude for what does last.
Yeah.
and you try your best to trade the currency you have for something that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
I really didn't mean to go on this little mini essay here, but that's kind of where it's taken me.
No, I think it's valuable because I think that's the thing is in this film, I can't escape the reality of the film that for all of the understandable and justifiable reasons why she passes this along at the end of the film, for all of those completely understandable reasons, Samara, it's the big reveal, and I love it, is a vengeful spirit, and all Rachel is doing, Naomi Watts' character is doing, is aiding and abetting this vengeful spirit at doing this. And as I'm listening to you talk about how we trade our time, I keep thinking about like, okay, so you do, if you cannot stop the inevitable end, like if you utterly reject the notion, well, I'm not going to give it to anybody else. Instead, I'm going to burn the video so that nobody else can ever watch it and I'll be the last victim or whatever. And then I will spend my last 3 days or whatever, like just investing, because there's all kinds of language about time that you'd say, we kill it, we spend it, we waste it, we invest it, all of these different things, treating time as currency, like that's what we talk about, either time as currency or time as this organic substance when we say we kill it. And I think it is like what a different tone the film might be if it was, maybe this is part of what subconsciously dings this film for me, is it spends so much time trying to unravel the mystery of what caused this videotape. It spends, like, that's how she devotes her 7 days, is let's point towards what created this video. And true, initially she thinks she's being benevolent by helping Samara. So I guess there's an argument to be made that, like, well, she's, but that happens almost by accident, where she thinks that she's helping this poor girl out. And so then, I don't know, it spends so much time unraveling that mystery to basically assist an evil, vengeful spirit to continue its evil, vengeful work. And there's something that just does not sit very well in my heart about that. Now, that's not saying some big broad statement that, like, there's no value in observing those kind of cautionary tales, but it doesn't feel like, and maybe you're going there, it doesn't feel like that's what the movie's trying to be. No, it doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't feel like, and maybe it should, and maybe that's a deficiency on my part, I'll own that, but it doesn't feel like a loss for her. It feels like a win for her that she gets away from it. Whereas, again, I keep comparing this to It Follows, as opposed to It Follows, where the final frame of the film is, yes, our two sort of heroes walking hand in hand, but in the distance, you see somebody walking behind them.
Jimmy.
You see, well, you think it might be Jimmy, but you don't know. Right. And that's the image that the film leaves you with, is this will never escape them. This will they will never fully get rid of it. It will haunt them forever, and that's what you're left with, as opposed to The Ring, where the final question is, well, what's going to happen to the person that we show it to? And ultimately, Rachel's silence is deafening. What's going to happen to the person? And she looks at it and is like, that is not the most important thing to me. What happens to the people that suffer because of this is not the most important thing to me. And again, looking back at, like, just how we reflect on our time and how we spend it, we've said in other pods before, maybe too many at this point, like, that we either promote heaven or foster hell by the choices that we make. We either spread one or the other. And if you, I do think this is a lie, but there's a lie that if you spend your time just loving the people around you well, that you're not doing much good in the broader scheme of things. I think that's a lie. Like, even if your nexus is no more than half a dozen people, even if your nexus is no more than 2 or 3 people, even if your nexus is no more than the debilitated family member that you devote your life to caring for, even if your nexus is nothing more than the 3 or 4 friends that you have in your life that you can influence and maybe make their life better and make their world better. Like, even if that's all that you spend your time doing, that is a valuable and worthwhile endeavor. But I think maybe there's something at the root of this film that digs at me, that says she spent her time basically, and admittedly she was duped, but she spent her time basically unleashing and abetting a vengeful evil spirit. And her decision when she comes to that crashing realization is not, oh my God, what have I done? But how do I escape it? Like, how do I get out of it? And I don't know, something about that just really doesn't sit very comfortably with me. And I think we should look around at how, like, again, talking about how we trade our time. Are we trading our time by looking at how much we can escape and get away with? Or are we trading our time with how much we can, basically push back against the ticking time bomb of, okay, and that's why I love Calvary so much. Like, Calvary is very much tapped into, I have 7 days. This is how I am going to navigate the world. I am going to, with no knowledge.
This would be an interesting double feature.
I know, right? The Ring and Calvary, yes. But it's like, without spoiling major elements of Calvary, like lingering with the shadow of death on the horizon, like walking through the valley of the shadow of death, he is still offering hope and help and assistance to the people in his sphere of influence, like the whole way through. As he's about to march down, possibly to his final end, he is patting a parishioner on the back and saying, "Let's meet up after this. We'll get you back on the right track." So it's just really striking me how The Ring is kind of about how she escapes these consequences and basically aids this vengeful spirit, which definitely has the fear factor. That's definitely got the scares attuned to it. But something about that general leaving me with that does not sit very comfortably with me. And I think that's part of, maybe I've just struck on why I don't really like this movie.
Yeah.
Maybe I've struck on why. Maybe there's something subtextual that I was just sort of scratching at with that. But
there you go, brother. Turns out I was right to be
maybe
16 years ago.
Maybe. Well, with that in mind, I think we can go to sort of. I don't think I even brought in the scripture verse. I did not, but yeah,
it's okay. Just back it up,
guys. You know what we've been talking about. Like the all I was going to reference, and I'm not even going to go on some big tangent. Was I was going to reference Cain's rebuttal to the Lord when the Lord said, like, where's your brother Abel? And he said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And was going to talk about how we don't care for each other, and instead we are actively fostering death in the lives of those around us, sometimes even of those we love. So yeah, I'll bumper sticker that right there. Let's get to David S. Pumpkins.
Let's put a ring on old David. So as we do every movie we talk about, we measure the film on a metric of numbers of David S. Pumpkins in the categories of style, scares, and substance on a measure of 0 to 5 halvesies count. So I'll go first on the subject of style. If I were going purely by the technical definition of style, that of just sort of atmosphere, mood, tone, what have you, I think this would have a high ranking. I tend to rank style more as a reflection of personal appreciation. It's funny, I went to neutral in the watching, and now the dial may be dipped back down to negative in the talking. I'm gonna go 2.5.
Wow.
Style.
Yeah. I'm gonna be a little bit more generous because I do think that, again, using my definition of style, that like, I think as much as I would, sort of trounce its narrative, I think it's got a solid tone, it's got a solid mood, it's got a very effective atmosphere, and some really effective scares. So I'm going to be a little bit more generous and give it a 3.5 for style.
Gotcha. And what about you for scares, Reed?
For scares, that's another one that I'm going to give a little bit higher. I really responded very strongly to the whole, you weren't supposed to help her, she never sleeps, and then Noah's death. So I'm actually going to give it a 4 for scares.
Okay. I will give it a 3 for scares. I think there's a lot of disturbing imagery, but but I personally feel like it ultimately amounts to very little other than disturbing imagery.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, it is disturbing imagery, and there are some genuine jump moments, and the mood and the tone are effective. So, credit there. As far as substance goes, despite there being a well in this movie, I think it is very shallow. I'm going to go for a 2.5. I just don't think, I haven't seen Ringu, so it's hard for me to totally
Ringu's better
backslap this movie, not knowing where that one sort of rests. But I feel like this movie is not sure what it is in and of itself. And so from that standpoint, it's hard to assess what it is trying to say, which I think is not a whole lot. So I'm going to, what did I say? Did I say a 2 or 2.5?
2.5. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna stick with 2.5.
And for substance, I think, so listeners, if you're going to balk at this is because not necessarily I don't think it has much to say, but because I have a categorical philosophical difference with what I think it is saying. I'm going to give it a 2 for substance.
This is interesting. A little all over the place.
I know. Yeah, I know it's true. But yeah, I just really, it doesn't sit well. It doesn't sit very, very well or very comfortably with me. So that means that we give The Ring a somewhat controversial 6 out of 10 David S. Pumpkins.
And who did Samara beat on the Monster Mash last week? I was ticked, whoever it was.
Yeah, I can't recall either, but yeah, she beat. Oh, yep. I'd have to go back and look at the graph. Who did she beat? She beat one of the spirits, but I can't remember who it was.
Well, that is her category.
No. Maybe she beat. Did she beat Beetlejuice? No, the Ancient Ones beat Beetlejuice. No. Yes. I don't know.
Anyway, y'all voted on it. All right, guys. This has been another entry in our summertime series, #Monster Mash, here at the Fear of God. Dadgummit, I can never get that right. Do it, Reed. Doggone it. I try. I even try to think ahead, and it just left me.
That is okay. And as much as you listen to our show, I'm surprised.
I know. I always cut it off before the end.
It is the beginning of, wow.
Yeah.
It is the beginning of wisdom.
Beginning of wisdom,
but
it's not the end of the conversation.
That's right.
Look, that's a callback. It's a callback.
Yes, that's right.
Kristen and Fred.
That's right. Kristen.
All right, guys. We will see you next week when we continue our 4th of 6 #Monster Mash entries celebrating the summer, celebrating the Monster Mash competition, and we will see who has moved on to the next category. See you next week, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
7 days.
We'll see you in 7 days.
The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but it is not the end of the conversation. To continue this conversation, you can follow us on Twitter @TheFearOfGod. Visit us on Facebook to comment on one of our posts or to post there yourself. You can follow Reed on Twitter @ReedLackey. You can follow Nathan on Twitter @TheNathanRouse. Visit morethanonelesson.com to leave a comment on this post or any of the official episode posts. Email us at fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word, fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. And last but not least, if you listen to us through iTunes, we would greatly appreciate a rating or a review. Thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week.